when you're growing old, I say. But
I like it.
Hello everyone. Do you remember a time when television felt like a warm hand on your shoulder at the end of a long day? Family Affair was that show. A story about 3 orphan children brought into the bachelor apartment of a successful engineer, watched over by the most dignified butler who ever graced a small screen. It sounds simple, but the emotions it left behind were anything but. Because after the cameras stopped rolling, real life took over. And real life, as we all know, never follows a gentle script. Hi, my name is Edward, and this is Screen Legends.
That's what they're calling him, huh?
Brian Keith was 44 years old when he stepped into the role of Bill Davis, a wealthy, globe-trotting mechanical engineer who suddenly found himself the legal guardian of 3 young children after the sudden death of his brother. And if you think about it, that is a genuinely terrifying premise for a bachelor. One morning you are flying to Paris for a business meeting. The next morning there is a small girl in pigtails asking you where her stuffed bear went. Keith played that transition with a kind of gruff, reluctant warmth that felt entirely real. He was never a man who tried to be a father. He became one, slowly and sometimes clumsily, and that honesty is what made audiences adore him. Brian Keith had already established himself as a rugged and dependable presence in Hollywood long before Family Affair came along, with notable film work through the 1950s and early 1960s that showed his range across westerns, dramas, and action pictures. But it was Uncle Bill Davis who gave him the role of a lifetime. The kind of role that stays attached to a man's name forever, whether he liked it or not. After Family Affair ended in 1971, Keith continued working steadily in both film and television throughout the decade and beyond. He appeared in numerous projects that showcased his natural authority on screen, including the long-running television series Hardcastle and McCormick in the 1980s, where he played a tough but fair retired judge. Audiences embraced him all over again. He was, in many ways, impossible not to trust. But behind that steady public presence, Brian Keith carried private pain that few could fully see. In 1997, he was diagnosed with lung cancer and emphysema, illnesses that had been quietly advancing while the rest of the world moved on. And then, before the year was out, he died by suicide at his home in Malibu, California. He was 75 years old. What made his passing even more devastating for those close to him was that it came just 2 months after the death of his daughter Daisy, who had also taken her own life. A father and daughter, lost within the same season. It is the kind of grief that has no clean ending, no final scene where the music swells and everything resolves. Brian Keith deserved a quieter farewell. But life, as this channel reminds us again and again, does not always offer one.
His playpen, sir, Miss Faversham was kind enough to loan.
Sebastian Cabot was 45 years old when he took on the role of Giles French, the impeccably mannered English gentleman's gentleman assigned to manage the Davis household. And, let me be direct with you, Mr. French was one of the greatest characters in the history of American family television. The man wore a bowler hat. He had strong opinions about the correct way to fold a linen napkin. And somehow, against all reasonable expectation, he became the emotional heart of a show about 3 orphan children finding their footing in the world. That is the particular magic of a truly gifted actor. Cabot brought to Mr. French a combination of theatrical dignity and quietly aching tenderness. Beneath every perfectly delivered line of dry wit was a man who genuinely loved those children, even when he pretended otherwise. His scenes with young Buffy and Jody carry a warmth that still reaches through the screen decades later. Born in London in 1918, Sebastian Cabot had already lived an extraordinary life before arriving in Hollywood. He left school at 14, worked as a chef, a garage mechanic, and an apprentice in various trades before stumbling into acting in the 1930s. What is interesting, and not always noted, is that Kathy Garver, by the time he reached American television audiences, he had the lived-in quality of a man who had actually seen the world and found it mostly absurd and occasionally wonderful. That quality cannot be taught. After Family Affair, Cabot continued voice acting work, most memorably as the narrator for Disney's The Jungle Book and Winnie the Pooh projects, a legacy that introduced his magnificent voice to an entirely new generation who had no idea he had once butled for a fictional family in New York. Sadly, Sebastian Cabot suffered a stroke in 1977 and passed away shortly afterward at the age of 59. He was gone far too soon, and the television world lost something genuinely irreplaceable when he left it.
But I like it.
Anissa Jones was 6 years old when she first appeared as Buffy Davis, the youngest of the 3 orphaned children, clutching her beloved cloth doll, Mrs. Beasley, with the kind of fierce, uncomplicated devotion that only a child can truly project. And she became, almost immediately, one of the most recognizable child faces in America. That stuffed doll, those pigtails, that open, searching expression that seemed to ask the world for just a little more kindness. Viewers did not just watch Buffy, they protected her. Anissa Jones was, by all accounts, a genuinely sweet and sensitive child who felt the affection of the audience deeply. But the entertainment industry of that era was not always gentle with the children it placed at its center. Behind the scenes, her home life was troubled. Her parents went through a painful divorce during the years the show was on the air, and the pressures surrounding a child performer in that period were considerable and largely unacknowledged by the adults responsible for managing them. When Family Affair ended in 1971, Anissa was 11 years old, the kind of age where childhood and something more complicated begin to blur together. She struggled to find her footing in the years that followed, caught between the identity the show had given her and the person she was quietly becoming. Work was difficult to find. The world had moved on, the way the world always moves on, and a former child star is often the last to receive that particular memo. On August 28, 1976, Anissa Jones was found dead in a friend's home in Oceanside, California. She was 18 years old. The cause was an accidental overdose of a combination of drugs. She had been, by that time, after Family Affair, Cabot continued voice acting work, largely forgotten by the industry that had once celebrated her so loudly. I want to pause here, because Anissa Jones deserves more than a sentence. She was a child who gave genuine joy to millions of people, and the system that benefited from her talent did not protect her the way it should have. Her story is not simply a cautionary tale, it is a reckoning. A reminder that behind every small face on a television screen is a real human being who needs more than applause. Mrs. Beasley is still out there in the world, in antique shops and collectors' cases, and the memories of people who grew up watching that show. And somewhere in that doll is the echo of a little girl who deserved a longer story. Johnny Whitaker, Jody.
What's your name?
Johnny Whitaker was 6 years old when he stepped into the role of Jody Davis, Buffy's twin brother, a round-faced, endlessly energetic boy whose scenes with Sebastian Cabot and Brian Keith gave the show much of its comedic warmth. Jody was the kind of child character who felt genuinely like a child, curious and loud, and occasionally exasperating in the most lovable way possible. Whitaker had a natural ease in front of the camera that you genuinely cannot manufacture. Either a child has it, or they do not. He absolutely had it. During the run of Family Affair, Johnny Whitaker also appeared in several other notable projects, including the television film Menorah, and later the lead role in the Disney film Snowball Express. He was, for a period in the early 1970s, one of the busiest young actors in Hollywood. There was every reason to believe his career would carry him comfortably into adulthood. But the transition from beloved child actor to working adult performer is one of the most difficult journeys in entertainment, and Whitaker did not escape its complications. In his adult years, he spoke openly and courageously about his struggles with alcohol addiction, a battle that consumed a significant portion of his 20s and 30s. He has credited his faith and his community with helping him find sobriety, and he has since made it a point of his life to share that story honestly, rather than quietly bury it. Today, Johnny Whitaker is 63 years old. He has remained connected to his faith community and has worked in various capacities both within and outside of the entertainment industry. He has spoken at events and given interviews with a candor and self-awareness that is genuinely admirable. The boy who once charmed millions grew into a man who chose honesty over image. And in this industry, that is rarer than it should be. Kathy Garver, Sissy.
Uncle Bill, I know you weren't expecting...
Kathy Garver was 22 years old when she took on the role of Kathy, known as Sissy, the eldest of the three Davis children, a teenager navigating the particular tension of adolescence, while also processing the grief of losing her parents. Garver brought to Sissy a quiet maturity that anchored the younger children's storylines and gave Uncle Bill someone to have actual conversations with. She was the bridge character, the one who was old enough to understand what had been lost and young enough to still hope. What is interesting, and not always noted, is that Kathy Garver was herself in her early 20s while playing a teenager, which required its own particular kind of discipline. She carried it with grace. After Family Affair wrapped in 1971, his scenes with young Buffy and Jody carry a warmth that still reaches through the screen decades later. Born in London in 1918, Sebastian Cabot had already lived an extraordinary life before arriving in Hollywood. Garver continued working in television and theater, and also found a substantial career in voice acting, lending her talent to animated series and audiobooks over the decades that followed. She has remained perhaps the most publicly engaged member of the surviving cast, attending fan conventions, writing her memoir, and speaking warmly and with great affection about her years on the show. Today, Kathy Garver is 80 years old. She is, in many ways, the keeper of the show's memory, the person who shows up and reminds the world that Family Affair mattered, that it touched people, that the family they built on that screen, fictional as it was, had a realness to it that audiences recognized because they needed it. She carries that responsibility with evident pride and genuine love. John Williams, Mr. French's replacement.
Packing?
Yes?
John Williams stepped into the role of Niles, a substitute butler who temporarily replaced Mr. French during Sebastian Cabot's real-life health difficulties in the third season of the show. He was 65 at the time, a veteran of stage and screen with a long and distinguished career that stretched back decades, including his memorable appearances in Alfred Hitchcock's films of the 1950s, among them Dial M for Murder and To Catch a Thief. Williams brought enormous credibility to what could have been an awkward interruption in the show's rhythm. He was, simply put, after Family Affair, Cabot continued voice acting work, one of those actors who elevated every scene he entered without appearing to try particularly hard. The best ones never do. John Williams passed away in 1983 at the age of 82, leaving behind a body of work that spans both sides of the Atlantic and several generations of theater and film. His contribution to Family Affair was brief but distinguished, and it speaks to the quality the show consistently reached for. The show's place in history.
When you're growing old, I say.
Family Affair ran for 189 episodes across 5 seasons, from September 1966 to March 1971. It was never the flashiest show on television. It did not have car chases or courtroom drama or the kind of plot twists that get people talking at work the next morning. What it had was something quieter and in some ways more durable. It had the image of 3 children sitting on a sofa in a Manhattan apartment, learning that family is not something you are simply born into. It is something you build, slowly and imperfectly, out of whoever happens to show up. That idea has not aged a single day. Thank you for staying with us today and walking this road together. Some of these stories carried joy, and some carried a weight that is not easy to put down quickly, but that is what Screen Legends is here for. Not to look away from the difficult chapters, but to honor the full story of the people who gave us something real. If this journey moved you in any way, please follow the channel and join us again, because the lights on the screen may go dark, but the people behind them deserve to be remembered. I am Edward, and I will see you in the next one.